Oh, hey, hi. So today I've been going down a memory while a little, and I've discovered something that books have always been a huge part of my life. But ever since, I think Young India and our philosophy at Young India, I've been very conscious about one thing, that at Young India or practically anything that I say, I am never giving out my opinion. I'm just giving out all the facts that are available and presenting it to you. I always believed that a well-informed person is literally the most powerful person in the entire world. And I feel like a well-informed person is only a person who has a well-rounded perspective. Now, to become this person, I feel like books have been a huge part of my life. And I think growing up years, I think books should be your best friend, because I think they can shape your perspective in a way that nothing else can, because you can travel, you can indulge into some real mystery, and you can laugh and you can cry, and you can definitely learn so much. So there are so many books in my house. If you ever come to my house, you'll realize that it's a library in itself. And even in school and college, I've always had a book reading culture, So here, I think I'd like to show you some of my books, which might help you also form a perspective and maybe help you out to become a well-grounded or a well-rounded personality rather. Now, I always believe that you should never only read from one genre or be like only reading from one subject matter. I think from, say, something like a Sapiens. So Sapiens is a very, very, very famous book. I'm sure you must have heard about it. Sapiens is basically giving a human history in a very anthropological sense about history of how human has evolved. But I think more than that, I think what this really has given me is, I think it served me more as a psychology book about why we behave a certain way and why humans behave a certain way. So in many ways, what is supposed to be for, say, a history or like an anthropological book has turned out to be like the greatest human sort of introduction to me that nothing else can. From saying this, something very different to all of it, maybe something like, something like A God of Small Things, which is written by Arundhati Roy. And I feel like great literature is something where you can write stories, you can weave stories rather, which can connect to a community which is larger than just, and the connection is rather stronger than, when the connection is based on a lot more fundamental concepts, which I think are a very, very, which makes for an incredible connection. I think that's what this book does to me. Now, there is a book like The God of Small Things, and then there is also another book, maybe like a follow-up to it, which is The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. They're both Arundhati Roy books, and Arundhati Roy is actually one of my most favorite writers in terms of the way she writes her prose and the way she presents it. Now, Arundhati Roy, it's up for debate, but she has certain kind of a left liberal ideology. I think as much as I've liked to learn about those things, I've also read a book like Breaking India, which is a Rajiv Malhotra book. And this, I think, is a classic book that's given me so much knowledge about Indian consciousness and about civilizational value of our country. So this is a little right-leaning also. So I think in many ways I've tried to keep my eyes and my mind open to take in perspectives. And that is the reason why today I have a very well-informed opinion. If I am reading or listening to something that a so-and-so person has to say, I am always mindful of the fact that he or she comes from a certain background or comes from a certain kind of a upbringing. So this book, Breaking India, I would say whenever it comes to forming an opinion about civilizational consciousness, and Indian consciousness. There are a couple of books, whether it is Breaking India by Rajiv Malhotra, then there is a book called India That is Bharat by J.S.I. Deepak, and there's a Vikram Sampath's book. I think these are legendary perspectives when it comes to Indic consciousness and civilizational value of our country. And these are books that I would say have really helped me a lot, because I think when you grow up in a sort of a mainstream international school system, a lot of the times you do miss perspectives which are I would say which are very much like, of some of the ground realities also. Not every one of us has experiences that can sort of shape all kind of lives, but I think reading books has given me that. So this one's a special one. Then I am an economics major, so my specialization in economics, and how can I not read a book that something that somebody I look up to very much has written, a former RBI chairman, former IS officer Duvvuri Subbarao. He's written the book Who Moved My Interest Rate, and I feel like something especially when it comes to subject related knowledge. I mean, whether it's especially with humanities and especially with a subject like economics, because economics is a subject which begins with assumptions and begins with the ideology that, you know what, you might be applying every single thing in the book and you might be going by the book and absolutely accurately, but you still might not get the result that somebody else might have gotten. I think that is why I would say economics, and especially I think economical development, all of these are a lot more instinctive than we imagine it to be. I mean, economics is always looked at in terms of statistics, so you have certain formulas, you're always drawing graphs. But I think reading some of these books, and then there is What Am I, and there's also another book written by Raghuram Rajan. I think these are all books that are written by learned people in their own industries who gave me a perspective about economics, that how much it has to do with sort of your own personal judgment as much as knowledge of the subject. Because knowledge of the subject honestly is something that a great, say, ICSE or Cambridge education, whatever, 12th class standard textbook suffices. You don't really need anything more to learn about our country. But it is not enough when it comes to taking those big decisions. So when I'm talking about economical development of my country, and also because, you know, when you run a company and when you're taking care of businesses, there's also so much more economics knowledge you do require. So I think these books have helped me very much. This one's Who Moved My Interest Rate, written by Duvvuri Subbarao. Right. Then let's get a little, I think we've been heavy and talking all serious topics for a while now. I'd like to take you to some of my guilty pleasures. I love adventure, thriller, you know, the cat and mouse sort of a chase kind of books and movies. They are my kind, you know, whether it is Angels and Demons is one of my favorite books, and then Lee Child is one of my favorite franchisee. And then Killing Floor and Jack Reacher, and these are characters and these are books that have really like taken me out of that zone of being all, you know, trying to make a difference in the education system. But I think it's also given me that imaginative ride where I am, you know, in some cat and mouse race or something of that kind, racing against time. And yeah, these are my guilty pleasures. I love them. Okay. And then I also have to introduce you to a very common book, but my most favorite book on the face of earth, which is, I think it would be a tie between Alchemist by Paul Coelho, because I think that has really given me that strength to pursue my dreams. Alchemist by Paul Coelho. I don't have it right now, but it's a very, very famous book. But there's another book which is an American classic, and I am like very sure a middle school going kid or like I don't know, a high schooler might have heard this book. Maybe they've had it even in their curriculum as an English literature topic as well. But To Kill a Mockingbird, I think I've read it, I think for the first time when I was in grade 8 or grade 9. And I thought I understood this book really, really well. And then I went back to this book, I remember precisely on the eve of my 18th birthday, and then recently also I think I must have read this. I think why this becomes my favorite book is because I think as a 13-year-old and then as a 15-year-old, it was a very, very different, it was a long time ago, and it was a very, very different me, and my impression of this book was very different. Today I'm a lot more grown in terms of, my experiences are obviously, you mature as you grow. So in terms of that, this book has helped me become this person who is who's consistently trying to look back and figure out my own perspective and how I have grown over the years. This is also one of my most favorite books, the most favorite book in fact, is there's a line here which reads, it's basically an American classic novel. I think Harper Lee's also received, the author, I think she's also received a presidential medal specifically for this book, and I think Obama's also quoted the Arthur Finch, the protagonist, or rather the protagonist father of this book, as the ideal American citizen. So clearly this one's the big deal. So I'd like to read something written here, back of the novel, which is like the quoted line of the book. It says, shoot all the blue jays you want if you can hit them, but remember it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. I'd like to repeat, shoot all the blue jays you want if you can hit them, but remember it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. I would say in many ways, I think if somebody, you know what they call about your true north is basically all your principles and your values and something that you stick by no matter what. This is one of those lines, and I think I'd leave it at the suspense there. If somebody understood this more than well, but I mean it's brilliant. But if somebody has not really got this, I think I'd like to make another video, taking quotes and taking these legendary lines from other books and which are truly special. And this particular line, makes it one of my principles in my true north. So that's why this is special too. Right, I have to show you a book, another book by Yuval Noah Harari. The other book that I showed you of him was the Sapiens one. So this one's clearly looking at the future, 21 lessons for 21st century. As somebody who is going to experience AI and as somebody who is going to really have that competition all over my face and something that's going to be onto my face and I have to deal with all of that. I think for me it has really helped me. I think when somebody says a particular businesswoman or businessman as a visionary, I've never really understood what they actually mean when they say that. What do you mean a guy is a visionary? But after I read this book and how futuristically they've tried to talk about it, I think it's really given me that vision that I talk about, that I want to look forward to, and that I have. So I think this book gets a lot of credit, and also our skill development program is a lot inspired by these books. I think what are the skills that are required for sustaining in the tomorrow? I think most of our skills are actually inspired by this one, and then obviously the real world, whatever the competition in the world and whatever India requires, all of those skills we are teaching. But I think this book has a lot of influence on our program, and that is also the reason why it's a cut above the rest, because I'm clearly coming from a perspective which is not just mine or somebody else's, but somebody who's a genuine learned expert. So that is also something that makes our program a little better than the rest. I have to mention Ayn Rand. I mean, can any book tour be complete without an Ayn Rand mentioned? I don't think so. I think Ayn Rand, I don't know, I mean, Ayn Rand is somebody, and her books and whatever she's written, the three of them, which are very famous, I think it's up to an individual to figure out whether they really can relate to this book or not. I think there are few books you read to get to know a perspective, and there are a few books you read because you get to know because you want to get to know who you are. I would say this book comes in the second version. I don't care if anybody understands what's written in them, anybody can relate to it, but I think everybody should read to it just to know if you are this person or if you are this kind of a person. This is very much on the philosophical side. So spoiler alert, if anybody is not big on philosophical stuff, stay away. But I would say just still give it a shot, because just as I started my video with, explore, read everything that you can, because that will give you a well-rounded perspective, and which is very, very important. Then, I have to show you something which is killer, and I mean it when I say killer, is the autobiography of Adolf Hitler. This one, and then there's another book which is an autobiography of Imran Khan, the ex-prime minister, who was the prime minister almost like a couple of months ago also, was Imran Khan, who was also this legendary cricketer. Now I remember, I mean, like everybody who walks into my library and watches and sees these two books are almost convinced I'm mad. Most of this book, why would you have Pakistan's prime minister's autobiography in your room? And why would you have a dictator who's killed millions of people, and why would you have his book in the room? I mean, what better way to get to know a person than reading their own work, their own words, and figuring out really what it takes for a man to be so different from us. I mean, this is definitely the accurate description of what I've given, because Adolf Hitler is infamous for all the wrong things. But Adolf Hitler also represents a time which was painful in terms of after the First World War, the way in which the Germans were treated. It was that angst, it was that suppression, it was that oppression that brought about something as, brutal as Nazi was. So in that sense, I understood where he came from. I'm not sympathetic towards him yet, even after reading his book, but I do understand where he's coming from, which I think is legendary, because I think in my field at least, where I have to deal with so many people from so many backgrounds, and I'm consistently trying to shape these young minds into meaningful adults, I need to know every perspective, and I need to know who is coming from which place. So this book's great. And then I feel like India and Pakistan have got a history, and I think as a very dutiful citizen, you should also know what they think about history. This is not just an autobiography of his Imran Khan story. He's coupled his own story and his own growing up and his own upbringing and his own story with the story of the rise and the story of Pakistan. So in that way, this has also given me a lot of first-hand experience, because it's a Pakistani citizen writing about his country, which made very interesting for me to read. And I had actually learned so much. I had understood why India is a certain way, and why we are functioning a certain way, and why they are functioning a certain way. And I think this is great. I think every policy maker should also read books from other spectrum too. Then, trust me, I think, you know what they say, when you know the other perspective, when you start thinking from the other person's perspective, all problems are solved. So I think, yeah, this makes sense when I read this. But I'm still not, I wouldn't say I'm 100% in agreement to what any of them have to say, but you should still know what they say. Then I do have a lot of novels. I read a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm very, like, I love classics, Hemingway and then Great Gatsby, and then even The Wuthering Heights, and even all the cliche books I've always loved, whether it's the whole Jane Austen saga. I think they're fun, they're my guilty pleasure. They're a lot of fun. I think they're also like, I mean, you should have some fun. I think when there's so much going on in your head, and when, I mean, the kind of work that I have to do, there's so much I need to constantly upgrade myself. It's nice to indulge in some silly stuff and remind myself that it's okay, that there is so much more like frivolousness around, which is great. Then, I don't know, I think everybody has an ikigai and ichigo ichi, which is the classic Japanese happiness mantra, or like happiness way of life. This is practically, I think, the only self-help book that I've really like tried to inculcate. Ikigai, I would say, is pretty functional. I think most of the times I do find non-fiction self-help books really difficult to incorporate in real life. But Atomic Habits is one book, and then then Ichigo Ichi is actually giving me a background of Ikigai, which is great because I like to get to know the context of everything, so which is great. And there are a lot more, but I think we shall reserve that, and I think we shall see in our next episode of what else books I explore. My motive through this is just, I think if anybody who's growing up and anybody who just wants to get to know how does a person like me who has an economics background can talk about policy making, can talk about politics, can talk about history, can talk about sciences as well. I did a lot of science as well. So in that terms, I feel like just giving a glimpse I think is helpful. But all in all, I would say have fun reading and enjoy the process of reading. And I mean, process is also sounding a little, sounding like a wrong word, but I would say enjoy the ride of reading rather. And yeah, thank you so much for watching.